Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be here. It's good to be in the house of God this morning. It's good to be just have the ability to worship Him this morning with you all. It's good to be called to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ. And I'm thankful that the gospel's been restored, and that same gospel, the authority that was restored in 1830, this week was Book of Mormon week, and that same gospel that was restored has the ability to heal, the ability to raise people from the dead, the ability to preach with authority, the ability to see miracles, and we've been given a special responsibility. And so that special responsibility is to bring the gospel back to Israel and to see Israel gathered again. And so as Brother Jeremy mentioned this morning, we received a good report on Maverick this week. And I knew it was good because Steph text messaged me, and she knows on Friday mornings I'm usually like booked with calls all morning. And she said, if you have 5 minutes, can you call me? And so she called me and she said, the doctor said that his esophagus is perfectly healthy. And so they had to do some biopsies to verify that there's no scar tissue, but we know that the Lord's healed him. And so, like I said, there's your proof that the gospel's been restored. The last couple of weeks, we've heard messages of. I've got them noted here. So all the way back in the beginning of March, we started this month with the theme of the Divine Commission. And we spent the day focused on the Divine Commission, the idea and the concept that the Church of Jesus Christ is supposed to bring the gospel to Joseph, which will unlock the door to the gathering of Israel, which is prophesied in both the Book of Mormon and the Bible. And then we had Region Conference, and our Region Conference weekend the theme was embracing the discipleship of Christ, giving your all, recognizing what the discipleship is, and recognizing that we have a great responsibility to do. And so then last week, Brother Brian opened, and Brother Brian's message to us was, "Are you ready?" And he kind of built upon this theme of embracing the discipleship of Christ, of, are you ready? Are you ready? Because as a church, we're going to start seeing things in this world that are going to be, that the world's not going to understand what is happening around them. And we're going to have to be ready to explain to them what's happening. Are we ready to bring the gospel to Israel? Are we ready to bring the gospel to Joseph? And so this week, as I was pondering upon my brother's words from this last Sunday, and as I was praying about this Sunday, and you guys know that a lot of times I get inspired through song. And I was getting ready one morning for work, and there was a song that came on my Christian playlist that I maybe have listened to it a couple times, but I was getting ready and it stopped me dead in my tracks. And the song is titled, Here Am I. So that's my theme this morning, is Here Am I. It's a Mercy Me song. So, some of our members went to go see Mercy Me this week, but that has nothing to do with it. It was simply, the message in the song stopped me in my tracks. Here am I. And I thought about all these different examples in the scriptures where, if you look it up, if you go in the app and you search Here Am I, you'll get a ton of hits. From all the way from back with Abraham and God, where God is calling Abraham, and Abraham says, Here am I. And there are times where even Abraham calls God, and God says, Here am I. So we're going to look at three of those examples this morning, and I really want to focus in on one specifically. So I'm going to go very quickly over the first two. The first one that jumped out at me, and I love this because it was, I have a note in here that says 2006 GMBA camp. And it's the story of Lehi as they're leaving Jerusalem. And we know that God instructs Lehi that they have to go back and get the brass plates from Laban. And they know that, Laban's this mighty man, and Laban had the record of the genealogy of the Jews, and God wanted them to bring that with them as they come across the promised land. And the brothers are murmuring, say it's hard that they have to do this requirement. And what does Nephi say? This was the theme of the 2006 GMA camp. It says, "And it came to pass that I, Nephi, said unto my father, I will go and do the things which the Lord hath commanded. For I know that the Lord giveth no commandment unto the children of man, save he shall prepare a way for them that they may accomplish the thing which he commandeth them. I will go. Here am I will go." That's the boldness of Nephi, stepping out on faith. They had no idea what they were walking into. And I'm not going to recount what happens, but that's the boldness of Nephi's faith in that situation. I will go. There's another, I'm going to go to the Old Testament for the next one. I don't know why, Bride, but this, I think this was a GMBA camp too. There's the story of Samuel when he's a child. And Samuel, this is the 3rd chapter of 1 Samuel, and it says that it came to pass at that time when Eli was laid down in his place, his eyes began to wax dim and that he could not see. And ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel lay down to sleep. That the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, "Here am I." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here am I, for thou callest me." And he said, "I called not, lie down again." And he went and lay down. So in this scenario, Samuel is being called by the Lord, but he thinks it's Eli calling him. And so he goes and runs to Eli and says, "You called me? Here I am." Excuse me. Here am I. And this happens a couple times. Now, Brian, the reason why I said this is because I remember at one point, I think it was a camp out, where Brian was doing God's voice of Samuel. But again, another camp out plug. This happens 2 or 3 times, and the third time, excuse me, Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I, and thou didst call me." And he answered, "I called not, my son, lie down again." And Eli's catching on to what's happening, and so he gives Samuel instruction. It says that he perceived that the Lord had called the child. Now it says earlier in this that Samuel had yet had an experience or a vision or anything of that nature with the Lord. And so this is the first time that this is happening. And so he hadn't really recognized it. And so then it happens again, and he says to Samuel, when it happens again, "You shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." Speak, Lord, here am I. When God calls you, we say, "Here am I." And it says that Samuel went to lay down in his place, and the Lord came and stood, and he called at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel answered, "Speak, for thy servant heareth." Now in this story, what the Lord instructs to Samuel is not good news for Eli. But I want to stop and focus in for just a second on the response. I can tell you that there's been many times in our household where one of the boys are going, "You called me?" And I'm going, no. And Steph says it wasn't me, and we and I like to joke, say it's the Lord calling you, right? So that happens. It often happens, and it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to answer that call. Here am I. So we're going to skip. I'm going to go to the third one. Okay, I'm going to jump to Isaiah. I know it's a lot of scripture, and I apologize, but. Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah in this story is being called. And Isaiah, he's being called, and it says that he has a vision. And it says that in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. So his robe, the train of his robe, fills the temple. And above it stood a seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly. So this angel, the seraphim, had 6 wings. 2 of them covered his face, 2 of them covered his feet, and the other 2 he flew with. And one cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. If we look out, we see God's glory. And the posts of the doors moved at the voice of them that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips. This is Isaiah speaking. And I dwell in the midst of the people of unclean lips. He is saying that he is unclean, and he dwells within the unclean, amongst the unclean. For my eyes have seen the King of the Lord of hosts. If you've accepted Jesus Christ, your eyes have seen, the eyes of your heart have seen the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs off of the altar. And I love this. I remember, I think it was Brother Joe Calabrese. Whenever he would pray that my lips would be touched with a coal of fire. And this is exactly where this comes from. Not my lips, but whoever was opening the service that morning. And he had taken a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar, and he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin is purged. So in that moment, the seraphim makes Isaiah from being an unclean being to a clean being. He's purged him of his sin. I can't even fathom this next part. I can't fathom it. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Could you imagine hearing God saying, God, the creator of the universe, he sits on this mighty throne. He could do anything that he wants. He's created this beautiful planet. He's given each and every one of us breath. He knows the number of hairs on our head. And he's saying, Whom shall I send? And who shall go for us? Who? And Isaiah responds, Here am I, send me. Here am I, send me. That's how we should be responding. When the Lord is looking at us and he's saying, Who is going to go preach the gospel to Joseph? Who's going to tell your neighbor about Jesus Christ? Your boyfriends? Girls? Who? We should be quick to say, Here am I. Send me. And he says, I'm going to continue on. He says, Go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. He's prophesying here. We know that ultimately that Israel is going to reject the Messiah. We know that ultimately that they're going to crucify the Christ. We know that ultimately that he's going to resurrect on the 3rd day, but they're going to be blinded by that. The scriptures tell us that they're going to be blinded by that. And it's all a part of God's wonderful plan, because in the fact that they reject him, the gospel goes to the Gentiles. The gospel goes to you and I. The gospel is restored. Excuse me. He says, Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and convert and be healed. And then Isaiah says, Lord, how long should I do this? How long should I do this? And he said, until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. This is Isaiah being given instruction from the Lord. Here am I, Lord. Here am I. What would you have me do? And he says, go preach the gospel. But they're not going to understand it. Their hearts need to be converted. So I'm going to take some liberty this morning. This is the Lord calling Isaiah, and I want you to put yourself in these shoes. Now the Messiah has come. Now the Christ has walked this earth. This is Jesus Christ has walked this earth. And he's taken upon him the sins of the world. We just sung a song about how he did it alone. He bore it all alone. And those closest to him initially turned their backs on him. We know that Peter denied him 3 times. Judas betrays him for 30 pieces of silver. In a couple weeks, we're going to celebrate this crucifixion and ultimate resurrection. But there was a commandment that Christ gave. So I'm going to take some liberty here this morning, and I'm going to flip over to Matthew. I'm going to bounce back and forth here. So, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And he says, here am I, send me. So Jesus Christ says, who shall I send? Who will go for us? Brother Bob talked about this morning about each of us having a ministry. And we have a ministry. Some of us, it's not to go to Africa or to India. Some of us, it is simply to just tell our neighbors about Jesus Christ or our boyfriends. I'm going to get yelled at later for that. I know. I'm going to take some liberty here. So what do we do? What do we tell them? Christ says, I'm going red letters here. Who's going to go? And you're quick and eager and you say, because you've been listening to the messages the last 4 or 5 weeks, I'm embracing the discipleship of Christ. I'm ready. Here am I, Lord. Send me. But what do I tell them? So I'm going to tell you what you're going to tell them. Oh no. I closed that other part. Matthew 11, 5 and 6 says, now, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk. This is red letters. This is Jesus Christ talking. This is a response to the disciples of John the Baptist asking Christ, what's the hold up here? Where's the Messiah at? And Christ's response to them is, go and show John again those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, the poor have the gospel preached to them, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. That's what you tell them. You tell them that the miracles of Jesus Christ exist today. I started out with a miracle. I started out with the fact that God's hand still moves today. We know that it says that blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. Are you ready? Yes. Here am I, Lord, send me. Well, don't be offended. Don't look like the rest of the world. We're to be converted, to be changed. So then we may say, well, how long, Lord? How long shall I do this? How long am I going to have to share my testimony? How many trips to Africa do I have to make? How many trips to the native reservation do I have to make? We think about those that have gone before us, that have labored diligently and bore the heat of the day. Those that have made sacrifices and have moved to places, uprooted their lives. How long shall I do this for? I just volunteered myself because I said, here am I, send me. But how long do I have to do this for? I'm going to go to Matthew 28 because there's an answer there. Verse 18 says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always. Even here, now, this is how long it is. You guys got me? Listen to this. Even unto the end of the world. That's how long we're supposed to do it for. That's how long that we are supposed to preach this gospel, to share this gospel with our friends and neighbors. That's how long, until the end of the world. And if you think that this is going to stop, you think that like, oh, well, Joseph's going to come, and this gospel's going to get turned over to him. Do you think it's going to stop? No, not at all. It says that in Zion will be sent out 2 by 2 to continue to preach the gospel, to ensure that all 4 corners of the earth have heard this message. And the message is simple. It's that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and that whomsoever shall believe upon him shall have eternal life. We get caught up in the natural things of this life. What cars we drive, how big our house is. In a couple of years, I'm looking at some of our young people. You're going to be making decisions about where you're going to go to college and what you're going to do for the rest of your life. That's fantastic, and it's important. But it's more important that you make a commitment to serve Jesus Christ all the days of your life. I remember when we were talking with Annabella at conference. I said, one of the things I said to her is, I said, do you recognize the commitment that you're about to make and how long it is going to be? At 13 years old. Some of us made the commitment at 11. Some of us made it at 13. Some of us made it at 14. Some of us hadn't made it at all yet. But it's a commitment. And it's a requirement that when we say, here my Lord, send me. Here my Lord, send me. That we go and preach this gospel. We tell of how the dead are raised. We tell of how the lame can walk. We tell of how the sick are healed. And we tell them that Jesus Christ loves them. And that the things that await us in this life don't matter, because it's what happens in the next life that are more important. I know that I have a mansion waiting for me. So I challenge you, I charge you this morning. We've heard consistent messages. God is telling us something. God is telling this ministry something, this priesthood, and we're conveying it to you, hopefully in love. Hopefully you recognize that we're just men. But we love you. And God is sharing a message with us that we are sharing with you. And the message is clear. Be ready. When the Lord calls, be quick to say, here am I, Lord, send me. May God bless you.
Good morning. I very much enjoyed the words of my brother, and even as he started his message, with the theme of Here Am I immediately turned to that chapter in Isaiah, because I love that section of Scripture. And honestly, the first time that God kind of spoke to me and revealed to me my ultimate calling to be ordained into the ministry, that verse was one that was in my head over and over again. And I remember there was a Sunday, I was a teacher at the time, and I was driving to church, and I was driving by myself that Sunday. I think my family was sick, and there was an ordination that day, and I believe it was Brother Josh and Brother Jason. And I was driving and praying for my brothers, and immediately I just kept getting directed to pray for myself, which is not something that I'm always comfortable with, especially in that day. I was praying for my brothers, for the day, for their calling, for the ministry, for the church, but I kept getting directed to pray for myself, and that verse kept coming to my mind over and over again, that here I am, Lord, send me. And I'd try to shift that prayer back to my brothers, and I would end up, again, back thinking about myself. And the message that was in my mind that morning was, all you have to do is be willing. Because that's all that verse is saying. He's not saying, here I am, I'm overly prepared, I'm completely qualified, I am in the perfect position, Lord, send me, I'm the one, I'm better than everybody else. He's saying, here I am. Nothing. Just a few verses before that, our brother read, he said, I'm unclean, I'm nothing before you, but send me. Because he had confidence that God would work with him. And I remember I came to church that morning, and one of the messages, there were a lot of speakers that day, but one of the messages was on that verse. And in that moment, that's where God revealed to me and said, you don't have to be perfect. All you have to do is be willing. That message of you don't have to be completely ready. All you have to do is be willing. And I love that message. And last week as we were singing one of the last songs, I was sitting next to Brother Brandon, and I was reading the song, and it was 102 in the Songs of Zion, and after the meeting, he asked me, he's like, are you all right? I was like, yeah, what do you mean? He said, well, we were singing that song. You weren't singing. You were just kind of locked in on the verse, and you had this look on your face, really serious. I was just making sure you're okay. And it was because as we were singing this song, and I don't know how many of you have done this. I've even said in the past, if I don't know the words to a song, I don't know why we're singing it. I've been around the church for 40 years. I know the words to most of the songs. If you're calling a song that I don't know at least most of the lyrics, you're probably calling one that maybe we shouldn't be singing. Which isn't true. All the songs are given for a purpose. But have you ever decided to pick up a book on a song you know, just because you wanted to read the words while you're singing it, just to kind of hone in on it? Because sometimes, at least for me, I get lost sometimes in just singing the songs from memory and don't really think about the message. And last Sunday, we were singing this song and I was reading it. There's all these words of kind of like a warning that's being given here. It says, many wait. It says, many rest. Many think. He asks, are they sleeping? Are you idle? There's no time for delay. There's all these words that are a little bit negative, a little bit, of a warning to somebody. And I sat there as I was reading these and just thinking of the seriousness behind those things. There's harm in waiting, in resting, in delaying, in sleeping, in being idle, because that's not what we're being called to do. Brother Dan rattled off a lot of the themes and the messages that we've heard over the last month, 2 months, even the last couple years of being prepared, of being ready, I say of being willing, to be able to step up and say, here I am, send me. But this song says, brother, step out on faith. Sister Jesus, you'll see, it's time now for those things. This isn't something that we need to start thinking about because someday we might need to do it. This is something that as the Church of Jesus Christ we're being called today to be ready, to be prepared, to be willing, to be able to stand up immediately and say, here am I, send me. And to tie it into where I started in Sunday school this morning, it's all because of that grace of God. And there's a section in 1 Corinthians in chapter 15, and I love, I've said it from up here before, I love the Apostle Paul, I love his story, and I love where he came from to where he is. Everybody loves a good comeback story or a good redemption story, right? And if you know the scriptures, the Apostle Paul or Alma, those are two of my favorite stories of those things. And in this chapter, he's talking about the resurrection of Christ a little bit and how he revealed himself. it says first to Cephas or Peter, and then the 12, and then he was seen by 500 brethren, and then to James. And he's rattling off all these people that Christ revealed himself to after his resurrection. And he ultimately goes and says, and the last of which seen him was me also. So he said, I was the last to see him in the flesh. And he says, for I am the least of the apostles, that am not meet to be called an apostle. So he's stepping back in humility, and if you read and understand Paul, this isn't a fake humility. This isn't a humble brag. He's honestly stepping back and saying, I don't deserve this calling. And I know that for me, I feel that weight every day. I just had a meeting as part of my training, and that was part of the conversation I had with a few of the apostles. Was I still, 2 years after being ordained, can't believe that Christ would use me for anything, let alone his ministry. I can't believe it. And when we talk about the ministry that each of us have, I think that's the proper attitude for all of us to have. Even being called into the gospel, just be able to stand back and say, I don't know why he would die for me. Like our brother talked about this morning, there's nothing special about me. There's nothing I can do on my own. There's nothing that any of us can do for him on our own. But yet we still have to stand there and say, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm willing. Send me. And the Apostle Paul here goes on and he says the reason why he felt that way is because he persecuted the church. He's saying, I sinned above all other sins. I didn't just do things that were wrong. I was actively trying to destroy everything that you are, Christ. Everything that you are, God. Every good thing you had, I was going around trying to kill it, trying to destroy it. But then he turns and he puts it right on that note of what the only thing that matters. The only reason that he was able to be called an apostle. And he says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. He's saying not due to anything that I've done. And if you know Paul, he studied under the best scholars. He knew the scriptures inside and out. And that was part of his persecution, is he could go toe to toe with anybody on the scriptures. But that wasn't what he's putting his qualifications on, because none of us are qualified. You could study and understand these the best that you can. You could be an expert on everything in our books, but that still doesn't qualify you for the work that God has. But it is only, as he says, by the grace of God that he is what he is. And it is only by the grace of God that any of us are what we are. And he goes on to say, it was bestowed upon me, or he says, I am what I am, and his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain. We read that this morning in Sunday school. Our brother mentioned it again this morning. That's what our mission is. He goes on and says, I labored more abundantly than them all. He said, I worked harder. So he's comparing himself a little bit to the other apostles and saying, I'm the least. I've done the worst. I didn't accept Christ from the beginning. I fought him. I fought the church. He's saying, and so I had to labor extra. I had to put all my efforts into this. For that one reason, it's to prove that the grace that he received was not in vain. I've read and I've heard sermons from other churches, or you see little clips of things, and there's that message of, there's nothing you can do to earn your salvation. And it's true. They talk about, you receive that grace, you receive it. There's no need to labor. All you got to do is believe. Because once you believe, you receive, and that's it. That's your salvation. You can't lose it from there. But I understand, and we understand the scriptures that call us to work for the Lord. Because if that grace has truly impacted your life, you're going to have that desire. It's going to change you. It's going to take you from wanting to just receive. Our brother talked about cheap grace last week, I think was the phrase, right, Brother Jeremy? It's not about just receiving. It's about laboring. And that's Paul's message here, as he said, I labored more abundantly than all of them, just to prove that grace he received was not in vain. And he says, but it wasn't him that labored. He says, but it was the grace of God that was with me. And so to echo our words of our brother this morning, and to tie it all together a little bit, if you want to labor for the Lord, if you're willing to stand up and say, here I am, send me. As the song we sang, you can't be waiting, you can't be sleeping, you can't be resting, but you need to understand that it's only through grace. You need to rely on that grace, but you need to let that grace change you. You need to let it put you in that position where you're going to stand up and be willing to say, here am I, Lord, send me. As our brother, I'm not going to jump up and down like Brother Brandon did last week. If you weren't here, you missed an aerobics class maybe in the middle of the sermon. Something that I don't think I've ever seen, but I'm going to remember for a long time. But as the leper, or as the blind or lame man who was healed leapt and ran, we need to have that willingness to stand up for the Lord. Even to our young people, we need to have that willingness to be able to answer whoever it is that asks you. to be able to say, here I am, Lord, send me. Or brother, if you weren't here on Wednesday, Brother John gave a great testimony on being put right to the test from last week's message. He said he walked into work and he had immediately someone ask him what it is that he stood for, and started grilling him on these questions. And he said he was in an odd setting. There were a lot of people in the room, and you weren't really supposed to talk religion in the hospital, but he was put to the test right away. And I would ask that each of us be willing and try to find those opportunities. Have you ever woken up in the morning and said, God, I don't know what it is for me, but give me some way that I can be a blessing today? We sing that song, Make Me a Blessing. And I would ask you that you have that thought in mind, saying, Lord, I'm willing. Here I am. Send me. Make me a blessing to someone today. Because that's all we can do, is to labor the best that we can. It's all about souls. It's all about bringing others to Christ, starting with yourself. If you haven't made that commitment, I ask you to consider that commitment. Once you have, continue to labor for the Lord, and he'll bless you in all things. So may God bless you this morning.